Hi everybody, welcome to this evening's AMBIT webinar. We are sorry that we're joining a few minutes late. We actually just started, but we actually didn't press the right button. So we've had a really nice dress rehearsal of the first 6 minutes, and I'm really sorry that you weren't there to see it, but hopefully we're going to now do a very slick round of introducing ourselves, given that we just did a round of doing that, thinking that you were all here with us. But welcome to this webinar. It's really nice to be joined by different members of the AMBIT team and also those of you that have signed up to join us this evening. I'm Laura Talbot, one of the programme leads for the AMBIT programme, and I guess how the next hour is going to look is that we're going to have a bit of a chance for you to hear from some people who have been doing some work in some AMBIT influence teams, and we're going to focus in a bit on what specifically they've been doing to support networks at this time. I'm going to say a little bit to kick us off about what we mean by working with networks in an AMBIT influence way, because recognising that some of you may have not done bits of AMBIT training before, or it might have been done a while ago, so just a bit of a refresher for everybody. We're really grateful for people joining us and using these live events and different platforms. We've done a couple of these now, and last time we did this we used Zoom and unfortunately experienced a security incident whilst doing so, which is why we've gone back to Teams. We have written to people that came last time, but if you're here and you did come last time and you haven't heard from us, please contact one of us either through the chat or through the method that you received the invite to this, and we can send you some correspondence relating to that. What I'm going to do is just do a quick round of intros with the rest of the team so that you can see who else is here, and then we will get started. So I'll just pass over to Liz.
Sorry, I'm muted. Hi, I'm Liz Cratnell and I'm the other joint programme lead for AMBIT here at the Anna Freud Centre. My role today is so-called producer, choosing which video stream comes out to you when, and so I'm the one that's fully responsible for not properly pressing the go live button. So I hope you took that few minutes break as an invitation to be mindful. At the end of the day, I'll pass it over to Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Fugel. A big welcome to you all to this webinar, which we're very excited about doing these new events for us. And I'm one of the AMBIT team here at the Anna Freud Centre.
Hello, I'm James Wheeler. I'm one of the AMBIT trainers in the AMBIT team, and I'm going to be having a look out for any comments or queries or questions you might have, so please feel free to put those in the comments box.
Hi, I'm Marianne McGoran. I'm the assistant psychologist to the AMBIT team. I'm going to be doing some manualising this evening from the session and sort of adding the learning to the manual, so you can have a look at that after as well. So that'll be available.
Hi everyone, my name is Charlie, and I work for a London local authority as an interim manager for an intensive intervention team, and in my spare time I'm an associate AMBIT trainer.
Good afternoon, my name's Anthony Scott, everyone calls me Scotty, and I am an associate AMBIT trainer, but I'm also part of a team in a local authority, and I'm an outreach therapist in that team.
Great, thanks guys. So we're going to be focusing in on kind of me and Charlie and Scotty having a bit of a conversation about their work. And they've both worked in AMBIT influence teams, you know, for a long period of time. But we thought this evening we would try and focus in on how their work with networks has changed, how it's stayed the same during this period where a lot of us are doing a lot more remote working. Alongside recognising that not everybody is in a position of working remotely. Some people are still having to do work, you know, in various contexts that's face to face, but will nonetheless also be affected by the massive changes in working environments and working relationships. So in the spirit of our kind of learning at work principles in AMBIT, we're going to focus in a bit on local practice, what that can help us to learn about doing this aspect of our work as well as we can at a time that's, you know, pretty challenging all round. So I'm just going to kick us off by doing a brief kind of summary of what we mean by working with networks from an AMBIT perspective. So Those of you who are familiar with AMBIT, this wheel will look pretty familiar, but if anybody's completely new to AMBIT, this is basically a summary of what the AMBIT framework is all about. So adaptive mentalisation based integrative treatment, the purpose of which is to help teams and networks develop effective helping systems around clients. And they do that by kind of paying equal attention to working with their client, to what the team relationships are like, to what the relationships within the multi-professional network are like, and in the teams and networks relationship to learning. And mentalising is right at the centre of our wheel, because that's one of the main theories that we're influenced by, and we're thinking a little bit about what the theory and practice of mentalising looks like in each of those different areas. So this evening we're going to be talking a little bit about working with networks, and that's one of the 4 quadrants on the AMBIT wheel, as you can see right there. So the way that kind of AMBIT was set up really was designed to help workers, and in fact built really on the basis of understanding some of the dilemmas that workers come up against in the course of working with clients. And the kinds of clients that AMBIT influenced teams are helping are clients of any age these days. Used to be kind of mainly something that we worked with teams who work with young people, but increasingly we work with teams who support adults. And what those teams have got in common is that they're trying to support a group of clients who have got a range of different needs. And it might be the case that some of those needs are things about which the clients are seeking help, but it might also be the case that they're not particularly seeking help or seeing their needs or difficulties in the same way that others around them in professional networks might be. So these are people who've got a lot of need but don't necessarily find it that easy to use help in relation to those needs. And again, when we think about often the kind of experiences that people have had in relationships, that can often make some sense. You know, it's kind of logical that they perhaps don't find it that easy to trust and reach out or let others in when the help is being offered. So AMBIT was really designed as a way of trying to think about how we could adapt help for people who've got multiple needs. And I guess we know that one of the things that happens when somebody with multiple needs comes into contact with a professional system is that there can be a lot of activity about trying to find them the right sorts of help for all their different needs. And the way that services are set up here and in many other countries is that we can kind of get into positions of services becoming very specialised at helping with perhaps one particular set of those needs, whether that's the mental health bit of the picture, the education bit of the picture, the social care, the kind of drugs work, and so on and so forth, the kind of poverty. And actually, for some people who can use relationships well and who are perhaps thinking that it would be useful to have some help, these arrangements tend to work quite well. But actually, for others, this experience of having multiple helpers can be quite overwhelming. And rather than seeing that the clients and their needs are kind of causing this situation to be one in which help doesn't often work out being that helpful, we would kind of see that actually the interaction of somebody who's got multiple needs trying to be faced with interacting with a number of helpers, some of whom they may not feel that they want or need, or some of whom they might be finding it very difficult to make sense of or make use of, is as much of the problem. So it's really this interaction between the client and the helping system that we're interested in trying to develop ways of supporting to work a little bit more effectively in AMBIT. So when we do have multiple helpers, you know, we can of course be in scenarios where there are not enough helpers, and we don't want to kind of neglect those, you know, situations where there are perhaps not enough resources that people can access. But when we are faced quite commonly, as we are, with clients who have attracted the attention of lots of different helpers, or have attracted the attention of lots of workers who think it's somebody else's job to do the main helping, we've found that we can run into fairly predictable sets of difficulties. Because again, if we're thinking about mentalising, all of these workers have got minds, which is of course great because we would want them to be thinking beings. But the things that can kind of cause us difficulty is when these minds have very different ideas in relation to kind of 3 key areas as we would see it. So they've got very different ideas about what the problem is for this particular person. They've got quite different ideas at times about what should be done. And they've got quite different ideas often about whose responsibility it is to do those things. So we can get into situations of what we call an AMBIT disintegration. So a network where there are lots of different ideas about what the problem is, what should be done, whose job it is, and a lot of time and frustration and, you know, all sorts of other feelings can be generated by these kinds of interactions between helping professionals, that result in the client, who's often at the centre of this, feeling at best confused, at worst, you know, pretty frustrated and put off help altogether. Because for them, they're in the receiving end of many very well-intentioned, often, forms of help that they just can't integrate and they don't make sense. And, you know, we're kind of very honest here in saying that nobody goes to work to create these situations. But actually, this is often the situation we find ourselves in when we are, you know, faced with clients who maybe worry us, who maybe make us feel hopeless, who maybe make us feel unsure, maybe make us feel ill-equipped. These are kind of in some ways quite natural feelings to have as a helper, who often is coming as a helper because they want to actually make a difference for people. But those feelings, if left unacknowledged, can create all sorts of patterns in networks that lead to clients ultimately not necessarily feeling helped, and in creating experiences for workers who can similarly feel quite overwhelmed and confused about what best to do. And we find ourselves falling into patterns of perhaps getting into conflict or avoidance within networks that ultimately takes us even further away from offering something that's experienced by the client as helpful. And in that vein, I guess when we're thinking about AMBIT, the idea is that it kind of gives us some ideas to hold in mind that might help us navigate some of these challenges, that can just be part and parcel of our experience of the work, often no matter what sector we work in. You know, we talk with teams all over the world these days who work in health, social care, education, voluntary sector, and these are very recognisable dilemmas. And our sense is the more that we can become aware of these things and have a bit of a way of making sense of them, it starts to become a little bit easier to develop some shared methods and ideas about what we might do to sort of try and reduce the impact of this on our work and on our clients' experience. So each quadrant on the AMBIT wheel has these pairs of stance features, which are essentially just principles that we're encouraging workers who are AMBIT influenced to hold in mind when they're approaching their work in that quadrant. So when we're talking about working in networks, we would say both of these things are really important, but finding a balance where we're attending to both is something that can be quite tricky. So we're trying to work in multiple domains, and all that means is we're trying to make sure that we offer a form of help that attends to all of the different needs that a client might have, you know, whether or not they're help seeking about those things at the moment, but that we're also taking some responsibility for providing that help in a way that makes sense to the client and that is well integrated. So if this is me, if I'm a worker in an AMBIT influenced team, you know, I'm seeing it as my job to take some responsibility for these situations that I might find myself in networks. And I guess I might be thinking about some specific things, you know, does the help on offer here make sense to this client? You know, if I was doing my best mentalising about what it might be like to be them in the midst of this helping network, are these the people that they would choose to be helping them? Are they being helped by people that they trust? Or are they in positions of having to take on help from people that they don't know very well? Who would they actually choose? You know, are these people around the client sharing some ideas? Is there something I can do to kind of try and integrate these different ideas that might be around about what to do, what the problem is and who should do what? And are the people that are in the helping roles feeling supported? So we talk a lot in AMBIT about the experience of workers becoming very isolated in their work, you know, not often only through physical means, and we can be surrounded by colleagues but still feel quite emotionally isolated because we don't necessarily let people in, or we don't feel that people would be interested to know how we're feeling within the work, all of which of course affects our ability to kind of sustain and, you know, regain when needed our capacity to mentalise and therefore to be at our most helpful. So again, we're kind of interested in the extent to which, when we're thinking about network work, we're trying to support other workers in the network to do their job as effectively as they can. And often this means perhaps stepping outside of roles that might be more kind of traditionally defined, and trying to think slightly more creatively and flexibly about how we can work together to support other professionals to ensure that the help, as it is being provided to the client, is being helped and delivered through people who are feeling supported and themselves connected into a network of professionals who've kind of got their rope. So that's my mini summary of what we're talking about within networks. And I want to kind of move into having a bit of a conversation with Charlie and Scotty, where hopefully we can bring some of this to life through some of the experiences that they've been having in their respective roles. So we've mapped out a few questions, but we wanted to just try and make this a bit conversational. So as people are listening to us speak, we'd be really happy for people to pop questions into the chat. and the others can shout at us in the nicest possible way to alert us to questions that they want us to come up. But I guess, yeah, Charlie and Scotty, let's move over to you guys. And you've both introduced a little bit about your roles and your where you work and your kind of involvement with the AMBIT programme too. But do you want to just tell us a little bit about some of the ways you've been carrying on and continuing your working with networks at this time? I'll kick over to you first, Charlie.
Okay. Some of the ways that we've been working with networks is remotely via this medium of MS Teams. And what we've been doing in our teams is post our consultations. So we use a consultation as our referral route. We have network meetings about each case. So we get all the participants within the network on a MS team call and have a conversation about the work. And it's kind of my role to be like that balance in the scales of thinking about the multiple domains and about integrating a network as well. Because some of the networks we've joined are already established, like we sometimes do, and you can feel that there's tensions already there. So we've got to use our skills and an ability to try and bring some balance and understanding to that. And yeah, so that's some of the ways. Yeah.
And you work in social care, don't you, primarily in teams that are supporting children in foster placements, is that right?
Yeah, I work in social care, but I work across the social care, so children who are on children need plans, child protection plans, and those that are looked after, and those are SGOs as well. So I work right from front door to back door.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. And you've been managing to kind of carry out a bit more of your network work through some of these remote platforms.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. When you were talking, I could hear a lot of the elements that were coming through. I'm not sure whether to give examples yet or to wait till later on, but yeah. So we using the teams to connect and bring network together in ways that we probably haven't been able to do before, and bring participants in, like schools or midwives that we weren't able to do so before either, because they weren't available. But now, because they're quite stationary and within their home settings, they're more available to attend these meetings as well. So that's brought a new dimension to the situation as well.
Okay. And how about you, Scotty? I think you're muted, Scott. It's all right.
I said it's been interesting having that AMBIT influence idea in your mind when you're working with the networks, because the times that we're in now it's very difficult for a lot of professionals for different reasons, and providing consultations has been one of the main things that I've been doing in my role since the lockdown, in terms of referrals that have come in to the service. And once we start actually looking at the referrals and start being curious about what could be going on in the mind of the referrer and in the network that is involved, and sometimes picking up a lot of anxiety just in the written word, and then actually providing that consultation where you are giving that referrer almost the space to be curious about what could be going on, trying to actually mentalize them so that they can mentalize the family and mentalize the network around them. So being AMBIT kind of influenced has really helped me in my team, and help the team in terms of how do we think more curiously about what could be going on in terms of the referrals. And as Charlie was saying, around reaching out to different teams, so reaching out to CAMS, reaching out to education, I think that being AMBIT influence has made the conversations with those networks a little bit easier. So it's been very helpful.
So I guess you've both started quite naturally talking about maybe some of the stuff. We'll hold the balance in this conversation. So we'll start with things that you think have been going well since doing it in this way during these times, but we will also think a bit about some of the challenges, because I'm sure there'll be things that lots of people who've joined can relate to. But it sounded like some things that have been going well is actually a bit more possible to link up as a network when we don't have the kind of physical constraints, I suppose, of having to travel and meet in person and all the rest of it. And Scotty, you were saying, I don't know whether you would have been offering consultations around referrals before or whether that's a new thing. But yeah, give us a flavour of some things that have worked particularly well. And obviously, if it links to you implementing AMBIT principles, that's great, but that's okay if not.
I think what's helped in the consultation process. So I had been offering consultations before the lockdown happened, but that was very short because I was in a new role and I wasn't in the team for that length of time. But since then, offering the consultations, what has worked really well is the language that I've adopted from AMBIT, and in terms of having a boundaried conversation with people in the network. So when we're doing the consultation, for example, they are presenting lots of different problems and they're not able to actually think, what is the help that I'm actually asking for? So being influenced in that language that we use is really kind of natural for me to help them to think, actually, what is the help? And having that boundaried conversation, actually, we've got 15 minutes. What would you like at the end of the 15 minutes? How would this conversation best help you? And just having that language enables me to mentalize myself. Okay, what could they be thinking? The referral is telling me this. What could they be thinking? And by having that boundaried conversation, it really allows me to really drill down to actually what is the worker's anxiety and what could be going on for the family. And it's given workers, I've had responses, it's been so helpful having this space to think about this referral, because often when networks are anxious around difficult presentations, something that we tend to do is make lots of referrals. But in this situation here, the services aren't there. So we have to be thinking actually more about actually what's going to be best for the family, for the young person, and how does the network work more cohesively and really think who's going to be the best person to support. So it's been interesting.
Charlie, I don't know what, hearing Scotty, what you would kind of add or sort of connect up with from what he was saying.
In the sense of what's working well. I suppose what's working well is you can get meetings arranged that you should take 3 weeks in a matter of within the same week. That's not been a problem. So that's been working well. I've had meetings with we consult and do network meetings with all over the country where our kids may be. So I've had meetings virtually in Scotland, in Cumbria, all over the country. So and not getting on a train or needed to get on transport that's been kind of helpful as well. And just the amount of meetings you can have is a double-edged sword, because it's helpful to the service that we offer, but can be a strain on the mind and on the eyes at the same time. And since what's been helpful as well is just, again, the amount of people, the amount of different professionals that have been attending the meetings because of their availability, because of having to work from home and not having to mix with the public. So that's been helpful as well. And get the network together to start thinking about the case from the onset and start seeing where sometimes disintegration may lie. So, for example, I worked on a recent case where we got the network together, already established before my team got involved, and recognized that and done a network meeting where I was able to ask a question to everybody what they think the problem is. And what was really interesting was that they weren't disintegrated on that part, but my colleague, because we do our meetings in twos now, because what we recognize is that a lot of we were in a new phase that we've not managed before. So we work in twos, so our partners can hold a different perspective to us, plus hold our rope if we're getting too involved. And what my colleagues saw was that they weren't disintegrated on what the problems were, but what she observed was there was different understanding or different perspective on the severity of the problem, which I had missed because I was leading the meeting. So we went back the second week and we addressed that kind of quite openly. And what came out of that was that the school were quite concerned that they were phoning the families of these high-risk children on CP plans and weren't getting a response, and the social worker couldn't understand why. But what she found out later on during the conversation was that they'd have to go back to the MASH to report that situation, which again raised it, which knew that she would kind of have to answer to that. So that made her understand what was going on, and they'll be able to work on a par on their concern, but bring down the anxiety within the network. And you could just feel that the little shift from that understanding that came through during that meeting. So being able to see those things coming through and working quite quickly, but is been quite beneficial as well.
Like, what's standing out from what you're both saying? I mean, as we know, and I suppose our main theory says is that it's really difficult to hold on to your mentalizing for any of us all the time. We know that if we're really in touch with our capacity to mentalize, we'll recognize it goes up and down, and our emotional temperature raises, it gets harder to think. But I can hear in what you're talking about, both of you, that you're very aware of thinking about situations in terms of mentalizing. Scotty, you were kind of saying you can recognise that there might be networks that are very understandably, they might have been feeling anxious anyway about these young people, but people might be feeling more anxious now because some of the stuff that perhaps was there before isn't there, like school, and people are experiencing their difficulties in new ways, or new problems are coming up. And as you say, that can lead to situations where people make lots of referrals in a very well-intentioned way, but what perhaps isn't always there is the thinking that goes with it about what actually is the problem. And it was reminding me of, the thinking together steps. People haven't marked the task, or there isn't a shared understanding about what help is wanted or needed. And as you say, you don't know how to be helpful as the helper unless you understand that. And similarly, Charlie, it's mad, isn't it? We do so many of these meetings. Network meetings are stressful, actually, aren't they? Often. I don't know if I find them more stressful or less stressful online, but actually this idea that you're recognising that your state of mind, it wouldn't be possible really for anyone to probably chair a network meeting, take it all in, and you've kind of got your colleague holding your rope, and it sounds like you've got a really nice sort of set of working relationships in your team where it's okay that some people pick up on some things and others don't. It's not like a source of shame, like they're not thinking, oh Charlie, how did you miss that? It's kind of quite an open dialogue, and the rope holding makes a lot of sense. You're trying to support each other and you feel supported.
Very much so, and I think it's necessary as the initial part of our work, because we're in a situation where, and people have been saying, we feel more similar to our clients than different. So when a networker is talking about actually going on a visit brings an anxiety and trauma, we know what some of us who've been out and about know what that feels like, and it might affect us differently. So it's always nice to have somebody there that if you may be emotionally triggered by that situation, because we don't know how we're going to react, but then they can step in, and now we've had that open conversation beforehand so that we know to take each other's temperatures as well. So that's been interesting.
And I don't know what, from either of your perspectives, whether there's some challenges that you want to highlight. And I think, again, just trying to keep the balance, we're talking about this from the perspective of workers, which makes sense because we're here as workers. But I don't know whether you feel that there are some challenges to the network stuff that either you're experiencing as workers or you imagine clients might be at this time as well, because I don't want to sort of forget to think a bit about how it might be for them that we're all doing this stuff in slightly different ways.
Yeah. And I have an example of a network where the client almost was on the bank of the river. Actually, everyone was trying to do, but the client actually wasn't involved in the process. And bringing that client on board wasn't difficult. But when I was working with the network, I kept trying to be curious of them. What about the client? What about the client? What is the client's needs? And then I got permission to speak with the client because it wasn't mine, it was ongoing. And when I reached out to the client, it became really apparent to me that there was a number of things that the network had in their own mind what should work, but the client didn't actually feel that way. So it was really easy for me to build that therapeutic alliance with the client, where I understood, where we were sharing curiosity about what the difficulties she was facing. So that in turn allowed me to then almost inform the network, even though there's lots of issues and there's lots of concerns and there's risk. Actually, if we can work with these elements, it's going to reduce some of the other risks, because this is what the client needs. But that was directly taken from the client. So sometimes in this situation that we are in now, yes, the networks are working more smoothly because people are available. But on the downside, are we forgetting the client? Is the network almost preoccupied with what they have to do? And does the client who is supposed to be at the center of the intervention, are they getting actually what is right for them? So it's that balance. And I think that it's about holding both of those positions in mind when you're thinking about the piece of work that you're going to do.
Mm-hmm. I was just having a quick look in the kind of questions and comments box, and I think something that I was going to bring up, because it's been important in all of the webinars and someone's asked as well, is, you know, there's clients for whom all of these technologies are either not available to them because they can't access them, you know, because of, you know, poverty, their particular situations and so on. But there's also clients for whom this doesn't necessarily feel like a comfortable way of working. It's really different. It takes getting used to for us, it takes getting used to for them. So for whatever reason it might be, there might be people who are not able to access help that's either wanted or not quite so easily through this. And I didn't know whether there was particular experiences in relation to the network stuff that you've been finding with clients who might be in those situations.
Yeah, I'm smiling now because I have a client that we started to have conversations, and the network was really anxious, and the network brought more people into the network, and that in turn made the client almost cut off from the network. She wasn't taking calls, she wasn't responding, and the network became really anxious. So I had to then tap back into the network and explain my anxiety around, I'm really worried, but I have this feeling that there's so much people involved. It's almost frightening the client off. And when we managed to get through to the client said that there's too many people in this, and I feel as if I'm retelling stories, and I feel like too many people are bombarding me. So it's only one mobile phone. So she basically said, I'm not answering my call to any number that I don't know. So then we had to, the network then had to actually come back together, and the person that had the best had to inform them, actually, these are the numbers of the people that will contact you. But as the network, what we are going to do is make the person with the strongest alliance with take the lead. So the technology can be a real problem in terms of if they don't want to answer their phone. Well, they don't, then that's basically the Arangi means. We can't, we're going to do a home visit and just check in. So it's a blessing and a curse having the network and the technology available.
Absolutely. Charlie, I don't know if you've got thoughts on that, and then we could go over to the others and see if they've got reflections or there's more questions they want us to answer.
I was thinking about networks, and actually made me recognize that within my particular role, how much I don't work, how detached I am from young people in the sense of the direct work now. But when I focus on what my staff are telling me about working with young people, I think the question about young people having not having technology is not been an issue for any of the young people that I've worked with so far, or even some of the children that I've worked with. You know, we work with families that we struggle to get food vouchers out to them, but each child in the family, and there's 4 of them, have got iPads. So the technology and the availability of technology has not really been an issue. I think in the beginning stages, the children found it really interesting to be able to talk on their phones, on WhatsApp video call, on Teams or whatever medium that they use. And we start to recognize actually how familiar they are with this medium, but we're not. You know, they're used to being on screen all the time. So in that sense, they were much more comfortable than us. So in the beginning stages, we had a higher percentage of engagement, much more than when we was doing face-to-face as well. So that went up. But in the last couple of weeks, it's been a case of, you know, you make a phone call. Someone said it to me today in our checkout at the end of the day, that a young person that was like, "Oh, can you call me back tomorrow?" And my clinician was like, "Actually, it doesn't work like that. You know, it's either today or next week." So there's that issue now of it becoming more like a phone call, a check-in, rather than actually this is a session. So their connection with the sessions are waning a bit now, and seeing it more like friendly phone calls that they can actually have or not have, which we're having more. It's not issue, because I think the fact that we're just checking in on them, I think is what's holding them in this moment in time, just grounding them through the situation. So we can take that and recognize that it is hard to maintain these situations. And we can assume that's not only us that's calling them either. Like Scotty said, there's others from the network that are calling them, which was one thing that we worked out in one of our network meetings, and had to kind of try to think about repairing it, where one family had 3 children that were going, and 2 of the children were going to 2 different schools. Now the rules are, if you're on a higher risk and you're on a children need plan or a CP plan, you have to get a phone call from the school twice a week. So before the meeting, they were getting 4 phone calls. So they were going to a mainstream school and a PRU for 2 children. They're getting four phone calls plus a social worker's phone call throughout the week, or sometimes 2-3 calls daily. And again, that's an adverse experience, and they were only answering 1 call. So everybody else was running around quite worried because they've made no connections to them. So again, through that network meeting that we had, was able to say each school can alternate on a weekly basis, but you email the network to let them know you've had contact with the family, thereby again bringing the anxieties down the network and bringing a much better experience for the families that we're working with. So that's been quite interesting for us.
Thanks, guys. Those are really kind of helpful, snapshots of, no doubt, way more bits of work that you're doing in respective roles. We'll just pause there, and then I don't know whether James or anybody looking in the chat, are there more questions or comments that people have had that they want us to answer?
Yeah, so I think there's an interesting one from Joanne, who said that does it mean that we, working with the technology, does it mean we're working well with our professional networks, but hardly any time is spent with the clients who don't have the technology? I think we've answered that a little bit, but I just thought it's worth raising. It seems like quite an interesting point.
It's a massive challenge, and I think my team this week, from the last 2-3 weeks, have been really struggling with that. Just being in a room with a young person, just having that presence where it's a different energy when you're in the same space, and I don't know how to explain that, but it's a different energy, So for example, as well, there was a situation where one of the people we work with, when their parents died today, and my worker struggled with not just being able to be there, not that you can do anything, but just being there, bringing them a coffee, sitting next to them, to support them in that manner. That was hard. Hearing young people going through some anxiety, and again not being able to just be in that same room as them, where your presence, because there's been that relationship is built, is calming in itself, and just having that face-to-face discussion. And we know that, and some young people said that they struggle with that as well, that these phone calls is not really doing it for them. But I think from the workers' perspective as well, that's become a major struggle, where the technology doesn't suffice the face-to-face contact. So a good point there, James.
I just had one, which is a comment that I came up with my head, is like, how about any kind of socially distanced contact, either with network members or with children and young people themselves? Is that something that you guys are experiencing or hearing about other people doing?
No, I'm socially distancing. I'm keeping myself at home and so forth. But I have spoken to some community organisations that are in the local authority that I'm based in, in the same area, and they are going out. They're meeting young people out on the street, socially distancing. But they realise that for a lot of young people, it's really difficult for them to stay at home, because there might be a family where the house is small, a 2-bedroom, and there's 5 of them in there. So the young people have no option to go out. So there's still kind of work that's being done in communities where professionals are socially distancing. But for myself, I haven't had any experience of actually working with a network or with a young person since the lockdown in a social distancing way. And I think it would be something that I would really want to do, because as Charlie said once, that humanistic aspect of the role, even I've been listening to your voice for the last 3 weeks, Scotty. I really want to know what you look like. I want to know what you look like, young man. And just to have that humanness in the intervention, just, I suppose it builds that epistemic trust where actually they're willing to learn something from me because they actually can see who I am. So yeah, that would be something I would be really interested in exploring further. Can we socially distance work out in the community?
Members of my team have been dying to get out there and do face-to-face work still, and but I think some of the, like, part of my team, part of the clinicians are NHS employed staff, and their governance dictates that they don't, unless it's of a particular tier type of work, you don't do face-to-face work. So their governance will dictate whether they're allowed to or not. And so far, I said that they can't. And for me, and for the social care staff in my team, again, is the same situation. Unless it's absolutely necessary, the rules are that you don't. We're working with social work teams, though, that are still going out and doing visits for high-risk children, or children who are in vulnerable placements that are at risk of breaking down. So they're still going out there and doing their work. But we, as a therapeutic support service, now our governance and our rule makers have set a standard that says no, and that's been hard in itself.
Was there any more questions, James? Or I was just thinking we could bring Peter in, because he was going to be taking a position of being slightly on the edge of the pond to this conversation. We've been taking it in turns to do different roles in different webinars, and Peter's kind of role today is to just, kind of add any kind of comments and thoughts about this from his perspective of not having been directly in the conversation. So we could perhaps... There
is one question from Yuri, actually, in the chat, from a colleague from Barcelona, who says that just wondering if people have experienced some of the clients and or their families are mentalising better with no face-to-face contact.
I'm thinking too, because I've been seeing families like this.
I would say, for me, there's been some interventions, some interactions that I've had where mentalizing has gone totally offline, but there has been some where this client that I was talking to, me sharing my thoughts about what I could be thinking allowed her to be more curious about her 6-year-old son, about what could be going on in his mind and why. So doing this mentalizing dance with me in that particular incident, I could sense that she was being more mentalizing of what could be going on for a child in her house. So I say it swings and roundabouts.
I think I've definitely been so much more aware of than ever before of like how easy it might be to get it wrong in terms of how I'm reading somebody. I was just thinking of a conversation from the other day with a young person where it was quite important that I was really getting exactly how they were feeling about this particular thing, and I just was really struggling to pick it up half through the connection and the connection and the online, and I just said, right, tell me which emoji it would be, because I thought we've got a bit of a shared understanding of all the emoji pictures, and she said, and I was kind of glad I'd asked because it was actually not quite what I thought, and then we agreed that was quite a useful way of checking in a bit more. And similarly, just other young people, when it's quiet or they're looking away or just a bit like, what's going on there? So I don't know, maybe certainly I feel more curious, but I mean, it's totally genuine because I'm actually just way less sure sometimes of what might be going on. Not that that's specific to networks as such, but I suppose a sort of online thing that I've noticed in trying to do work with people. And I can only imagine if it's people that you've not met or you can't see their face, it's just a whole other ball game, isn't it? But I suppose that's where our sort of open source thinking and broadcasting comes in, I think it's more important than ever to not pretend that you've got it and to be all right with just saying, oh, do you know what, it's really hard over the phone because I can't see your face. So you'll have to let me know if I'm saying something that just sounds completely mad, because if you're making a face I won't be able to see, or whatever, you know, just being prepared to let them know and help them understand a bit what it's like. And if you're getting it wrong, as ever, it's not on purpose, something to do with the medium that doesn't help. Peter, let's go to you.
I thought it was really interesting. There were two things I suppose I was particularly struck by. And when we were right at the beginning, the focus on networks was trying to improve coordination. It was really an idea that basically it would just help if everybody kind of knew a bit more about what they were doing. I think that remains true, but I think what the focus now is rather different on AMBIT, which is that there are real disadvantages in having too many people involved. It's not just we want to coordinate. It's actually that some of the difficulties that the young people have are partly to do with the very nature of how we'd help them. It's not the kind of the diversity of roles and expecting young people and their families to engage in helping relationships with more than a small number of people seems to us to be now increasingly the problem. It's part of it's not just we've got to coordinate. And I suppose it's again emphasizing the whole process of how you establish trust, or not necessarily how you establish trust, but how you recognize where trust is. And it's much more about that than worrying too much about who's got the expertise about the particular problem. Let's start with the other way around, as to who does the young person trust, and to try to build the system that way around. I don't think we had any idea of that at the beginning. I think that the focus now is that there is a real advantage in reducing the number of people, and Scotty, your example of, you know, reducing the number of people that are phoning a young person, you know, just that the young person starts to recognize just one or two numbers that come up on their phone is a way of the world becoming a bit more predictable to them. So I suppose those things are really, really key. And I suppose it was kind of comforting to us to discover that there was the research from Canada that was supporting the same kind of idea, that actually, particularly young people receiving help from social care, they did better if they had less workers than if they had more workers. So sort of less help was more effective. And I think that's it's a really interesting and important theme for us. So part of networks, working with networks, is how can we simplify it? That's one bit, but the other bit is about how we nurture trust. And I think what's really interesting for me about the conversation about how much can one do this over, you know, through a screen? How much can, you know, how much, because clearly there's a kind of language when you're with somebody that you communicate about how you're hearing or listening to what they're saying through how you respond in your body and how you kind of the small things. So there's a kind of way that I think one communicates and nurtures aspects of trust through being present. I think that's true. But I suppose what has been massively interesting and surprising over the last month or so is that it is possible. It's surprising what can be done through this screen business. I mean, that's what I would be rather wanting to avoid coming too much to a kind of rule about this. It may be that the rule is that for some young people, they're less agitated, they're less aroused, they're able to be in a slightly more calm state by communicating through social media than they are face to face, and and they may be able to think more by not being present with us as they may be with us. And I just been struck by the very surprising examples of where there has been connection with young people that we've been working with through a screen that wouldn't have been what I'd have expected. So I think for us, the kind of probably the rule or the kind of guidance is what enables a young person to be able to feel comfortable and safe in the interactions that they're having with their helper, and that will just vary. And it seems to me that we don't, and there's probably not any formula about that. But I just think what's been interesting. It's not that remote working can replace face-to-face working. It's not that. But it's just that remote working may provide a vehicle to support trust in a way that I don't think we were entirely expecting. So it's just, I think there's a lot to learn here about how this might be. And it's not, when people have been working this way for a long time, but it's just that we're now required to work this way. So I think we're learning faster, if I can put it that way. Those would be my comments.
Thanks, Peter. Go on, Charlie. You look like you were going to.
I think to just add on what Peter was saying, for us, it's added another option as well. So for some of those kids that we maybe not be able to engage in the physical, they've engaged a lot better through social media and be much more available and open and in discussion as well. So where we hadn't considered it in the past, we'll consider it going forward. And also maybe working with children that are out of borough, or teams that are long distance, will be much more accessible to them using this medium as well. So it gives us options, which is always nice to have in the work that we do. But like Peter said as well, it's definitely not a replacement, because certain things can't be replaced. I was just thinking about some kids that we work with that sometimes I even match the work I've built on their physique. So we're trying to get a young person out. Sometimes they feel safer being with a bigger person, but your size doesn't matter when you're on a screen because you're still smaller than them. You understand? So there's those little things, nuances that you miss when you're in a physical presence of somebody that you can't get over the screen.
Yeah, I was just thinking of another example that springs to mind of, again, in AMBIT, we talk a bit about the team around the worker and how if you're the one with the trust, it's your job to support that young person's relationships with new helpers who might be useful. And, with a colleague in the team here, we've had a sort of successful experience of doing a little introduction to a new person who I think might be a bit helpful, and I just want to let them meet you over Teams and video. And actually, would I have imagined that would work? I don't really know what I thought, but it did. And I sort of said to the young person, oh, it's a bit weird, we've got someone joining our call. And he said, well, you're not a random, so I trust they're not a random, so it will be okay. And I thought, okay, epistemic trust wins the day, even over Microsoft Teams. And I just think I would never have thought of that before as an option if I was meeting a young person with a new worker, or if we were working with adults. But I might say, well, would you prefer to do it face to face, or do you want to do it online? Would that feel easier? So I totally agree. I think it's us being open to possibilities as much as it is respecting different people's preferences, workers, colleagues, clients alike, because there may be some things that we've learned here that could be useful to just kind of strengthen our capacity to be helpful going forward. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm sort of feeling I've landed from hearing a bit from everybody today. So we've come to 6:30. So in the spirit of doing good, marking the task, we said it would be an hour, so we won't keep you any longer. But I guess I've really enjoyed hearing from Charlie and Scotty, and thank you both very much for just talking so openly about your experiences, and very thoughtfully kind of linking them up with AMBIT and helping us to kind of understand what your work looks like, both in terms of good stuff and some of the challenges. So really appreciative of that, and obviously to the rest of the team who've been busy on the chat and keeping questions coming in and manualising. We've been writing up these and putting them in the AMBIT manual, so you'll see there's a tab at the top in the manual that has got some, I'm just checking if I've got the page, ways of keeping in touch. You can log into the manual here, and you'll notice there's a new section in the top menu bar called blog, so you can see the previous manualisings of other webinars that we've done. You can also obviously follow us on Twitter, and if you'd like to email us, we've just reactivated this email account here that we didn't know had been deactivated, so sorry if you've contacted us on there recently, but you can also kind of join the mailing list via a sign up link in the manual to hear more about more webinars. So thank you very much, guys. It's been really nice to have you with us, and we wish you well in your work over the next few weeks, and hopefully you'll join us again in a couple of weeks. All right, thanks very much. Bye bye.